A middle schooler named Seyoung, who looks like he was almost beaten to death, is rushed to a hospital for immediate medical attention. Two police officers learn about the situation, and with swift analysis, they narrow down the suspect list to 8 people who belong to a delinquent group. The officers also confirm that the assailants who had put Seyoung in such misery are nothing more than a bunch of middle schoolers, as the investigation team reports to them that the ones who had beaten Seyoung up were wearing middle school uniforms. If the news is published, people aren't going to let Seyoung have his justice because the attackers are a bunch of kids, which leaves the officers questioning how they are going to bring the criminals to justice. Seyoung opens up his eyes and finds himself on the hospital bed, having nothing but bones and skin on his body, meaning that he has been in a coma for a long time. His aunt, who is supposed to be in another country because of her marriage, is there beside him, holding his hands, causing Seyoung to become confused. As his brain fails to process what's going on, it starts hallucinating and shows him the 8 evil faces who put him in such a state, laughing at him like maniacs. This hallucination triggers Seyoung's PTSD, which causes him to go into shock and shake violently. His aunt screams for the doctor, being terrified to the core as she cannot bear to see her nephew like that. As the doctor rushes in hearing the cries of Seyoung's aunt, he figures that Seyoung is going through a seizure attack, so he quickly neutralizes him with a sedative and reveals the pierce marks on his hands, which indicates that such occurrences have happened before. Seyoung, who desperately opens his eyes again, tries to hear what his aunt is saying to the doctor, and upon hearing their conversation, he realizes that he has been in a coma for the past 9 months. Thankfully, this time he doesn't go back to coma, which puts his aunt at ease. She peels an apple for him to eat because he needs nutrition to rebuild his body, and while doing so, she tells him that his father thought that he would never wake up. She also reveals that Seyoung has a mother, which is surprising as she is nowhere to be found. Apparently, Seyoung's mother hasn't given up and wants to either take revenge or bring the 8 criminals to justice. According to Seyoung's aunt, Seyoung's parents did everything they could in the past 9 months, but still failed to punish the assailants. Because they are just a bunch of middle schoolers, the court decided to settle the case by offering Seyoung's parents some money. However, Seyoung's dad refused to take it and kept on fighting for justice, which unfortunately led to nothing. Seyoung's aunt also mentions that the assailants were only suspended from school and the teachers involved only received a legal warning letter. Hearing this, Seyoung gets tears in his eyes, but his aunt continues telling him how much both of his parents have suffered this past year. They begged people to sign a petition and wandered around the city like beggars holding posters, pleading with everyone to give their signatures in order to get their son justice. Not only that, they even got to their knees in front of all of the powerful people they knew and told them how unfair and unjust all of it was. But still, nobody helped them because nobody cared. Every time they tried to post their side of the story on the internet, it was taken down immediately. Anyone on the legal side who tried to help them either got fired or transferred. To sum it up, it means that the 8 kids' parents are someone who has strong influence in this country, and that is why they aren't getting punished. This led both Seyoung's dad and mom to become so devastated that they took their lives in front of the world, hoping that someone after their deaths would finally care and fight for justice in their stead. Learning so casually that both of his parents have taken their own lives, Seyoung becomes lost for words, screams at the top of his lungs in anguish, and regrets ever going to coma as all of this happened when he was sleeping. After regaining composure, Seyoung asks his aunt to continue how his parents took their lives and what followed after that. His aunt, who struggles to find words, tells Seyoung that his father and mother burned themselves to death, but the bystanders there only recorded the incident on their phones and didn't even bother to help any one of them. Eventually, when the emergency ambulance arrived there, it was too late, as both of them were nothing more than potato crips at that point. Because of their self-sacrifice, the assailants were once again brought to attention and got proper punishment, as all 8 of them received juvenile detention for 2 years. Besides, the teachers involved were also fired from their jobs. Furthermore, the parents of those 8 criminals held a press conference and apologized to the entire country. But because the video of Seyoung's parents taking their lives spread through the internet like wildfire, the media and press were still out for more blood. With the entire country wanting Seyoung's justice, the president paid Seyoung a visit and wished for his well-being. But that was all the justice system could do, as the assailants were still a bunch of kids who, under the law, couldn't get anything more than juvenile detention, which makes Seyoung think that his parents' sacrifice had no impact whatsoever. Sometime in the future, a man from the management office of a local building shakes hands with a woman, rents her a place, and tells her that her rent comes due on the second day of every month. He also tells her that if she comes across any inconvenience or any problems, she can contact their management office. Although the woman thinks that she has the right to make complaints directly to the owner in that case, the man makes it clear to her that she should only contact the management office, even if it's an emergency. He warns her, saying that the owner of her apartment is not someone who is fond of human interaction. And he also adds that she should never go to the rooftop, as the owner apparently lives there in the rooftop room. Making everything clear to her, the man deems that there's nothing further to discuss and takes his leave. The owner, who lives in the rooftop room, reveals himself to be none other than Seyoung, who has completely shut himself in and is surrounded by many trash bags because he never tends to leave his room. He reveals that he is constantly on his computer, looking for ways to take revenge on his 8 assailants, and finds the Shinjin Group, Bluing Media, and the Goodfield Company, who were perhaps the ones who refused to help his parents and help the criminals by taking down their case. Suddenly, a woman arrives at Seyoung's door, who apparently has rushed over from the hospital just to see him. The woman comes inside the room, scolding Seyoung immediately for living like a total shut-in, and seeing the dozens of trash bags, she becomes totally disgusted at his behavior. Revealing herself to be his health consultant, the woman tells Seyoung that she needs to get done with their session quickly today, as she has to go on a group blind date. She asks Seyoung about his arms, legs, backs, and eyes, and learns from him that every part of his body still hurts. She writes his blood pressure without even checking, because perhaps she is too disgusted to touch his arm. After writing the report, the woman tells Seyoung to move on already, as it has already been 2 years, and begs him to go outside at least once, even if he doesn't want to go back to his school to study. Advising him to meet some people and live once again like a human being, the woman leaves, completely disappointed in him. But her words don't impact Seyoung at all, as he just goes back to using his computer and plugs his phone in, which has the wholesome wallpaper of his parents holding him when he was a baby. He then hacks into a social media group chat where he reads the conversation between 5 of his 8 assailants who are preparing to come back to their country, revealing that they are not in juvenile detention but in the United States thanks to their influential parents. Not only that, they have the liberty there to party around and go out on dates, which means that Seyoung's parents' sacrifice meant nothing because they didn't get punished at all. Realizing that, Seyoung goes back to his bed, wondering if there's any way at all to bring the 8 of them to justice, and falls asleep with the desperate urge to take revenge. At that moment, a mysterious meteorite crashes into his rooftop, prompting Seyoung to wake up. Hearing the crashing sound, Seyoung assumes that it's a thief outside, or worse, his 8 assailants who have come there to beat him to a pulp again. But still, Seyoung musters up some courage and opens the door hesitantly to find a gleamy ray of light that is revolving around a mysterious sword that is stuck into the ground. Seyoung, who doesn't understand who, how, and what caused this sword to be here, begins to take a look around it out of sheer curiosity. Seeing that the door to the rooftop is locked means that no one came from the stairs, but knowing that no one would be crazy enough to climb the walls of this 10-story building, Seyoung once again wonders how this sword ended up here, and as the confusion overloads his brain's capacity, he starts screaming as he has failed to figure out anything at all. Not wanting to get involved in this Excalibur legend storyline, he goes back to his room and lays down on his bed to go back to sleep, as he simply doesn't care what happens outside of his rooftop room. But the mysterious sword doesn't allow Seyoung to not care and starts buzzing like crazy, which creates these loud drum beats and horns that teleport Seyoung away to a battlefield. As he finds himself surrounded by many gladiators led by a man with that very sword who is fighting against the army of giants, dragons, and many mysterious creatures, he realizes that the sword has a deeper meaning to its sudden existence. The scene shifts, and Seyoung is taken sometime into the future of this battle. This time he sees that the enemy army's corpses are piled up in one place, and at the top of the pile rests the hero's sword, which again makes Seyoung realize how much legacy this sword has. As he returns to reality, he assumes that all of it was nothing but a dream, but once he steps outside and finds the sword up in flames again, he realizes that it's not a dream but an opportunity. The flames quickly turn into a sea of fire, prompting Seyoung to seek shelter in his room. He fills up a water bucket to put out the fire, but fails to lift the bucket up because he has little to no strength in his body. So he first reduces the amount of water in that bucket and then pours it onto the sword, which does no help at all as the fire seems to be endless. so he continues the process of filling and pouring water several times until he successfully manages to put out the fire. His entire body starts to ache because of all that effort when he notices that there was a hose pipe right there attached to a water tap, meaning that he could have just used it if he had paid attention to his surroundings. In any case, Seyoung goes back to his room to take a nap and once again finds the sword engulfed in flames. After 4 days of the same thing happening over and over, he gets used to it and casually puts it out using the hose pipe. But the one thing Seyoung doesn't get used to is the drum beats, which constantly disrupt his sleep every single time he goes to bed. He soon figures out that every time the clock hits 12, the sword starts, the drum beats itself, and it engulfs in flames. So he waits for it to happen and puts out the flames before they can engulf the sword at all. After taking care of the fire, Seyoung goes back to using his computer, begins to investigate the sword, and finds the answer to his questions. The internet suggests that the sword is the work of evil, so Seyoung sprays it with holy water and recites the prayers to exorcise any evil spirits in it. But that backfire literally causes the sword to engulf in flames once again, making him realize that perhaps the sword is not the work of Satan. Not being able to deal with this stupid thing every single day, Seyoung decides to do whatever it takes to destroy the sword and brings a toolbox there. As he takes out a hammer from the toolbox, he reveals his intentions of beating the sword with the hammer. But once he smashes the sword with it, his hammer is the one to break, making him realize that he would need a bigger weapon. So he comes back with a steel baseball bat, but even that doesn't manage to put a scratch on the sword and ricochets back to Seyoung because of the shockwave, hitting him on the face and flies away. With a huge bump on his forehead, Seyoung decides to go all out this time, accepts the Excalibur storyline being forced by the sword itself, and uses both of his hands to pull it out of the ground. As Seyoung uses all of his strength to do so, the sword gets engulfed in flames once again and turns into a large ball of light, which forcefully enters his body. It shows all of the memories of the sword's original wielder. It shows the hero's life, how he played an army of demons, how he started his own family, trained his own son, and passed the legacy on to him as well. As all of these memories enter Seyoung's brain, his head starts to feel like it's about to fall apart, but he manages to survive through the pain, and not only that, he also manages to lift the sword out of the ground, revealing that it is truly quite a long sword. Meanwhile, the tenants of the building, who have also heard these loud noises coming from the rooftop for the past couple of days, gathered together to discuss the matter. They tell each other how hard it has been for them to go to sleep at night because of how loud things get. Since nobody knows who the owner is or what he is doing on the rooftop that is causing this much noise, they become intrigued and call the building manager, who simply says the screams and the noises are none of their business. Seyoung wakes up a few hours later, and with the memories of the hero still flowing inside of him, he starts feeling despair, happiness, sadness, fury, guilt, and hatred, all at the same time. With all of the emotions springing inside of him as if they are alive, Seyoung gets the feeling that he has lived through ages untold and unimaginable. He gets up from the floor with the mysterious sword still attached to his right arm, and as he realizes that he has managed to lift it up from the ground, he wonders how he managed to do so since the sword is almost a meter long, which cannot be wielded by a weakling like him. The bigger question is how the sword didn't affect the tenants owning the floor below, as logically speaking, it should have pierced through the ceiling to the floor below because of how long it is. Having no answers whatsoever, Seyoung just lifts the sword up for now, but because of how heavy it is, he fails to stand still and falls to the ground with the sword crashing on top of him. After a long struggle, he does succeed in putting the sword against the wall and touches it, which activates a memory of the hero and lets him know that the sword is called the War Sword. The War's word apparently brings thunder and storms to its enemies and has many legends and legacies behind the name. Seyoung's heart still aches because of the overflow of emotions, and as he starts to give up, the hero appears before him and whispers to him, telling him to never change and never give up the will and the courage to fight. With the hero's memories motivating Seyoung, he lifts up the sword once again and wields it perfectly, allowing the sword to show him how once the hero fought using it freely and without any restrictions. As the technique comes to Seyoung, he naturally manages to replicate the hero's technique by following the images inside his head, and he learns how to use the war sword just like that. However, he is still physically weak, so he still needs to work on building his core strength in order to utilize the sword to the fullest. As he loses all of his energy because of using the sword, he calls his health consultant Bora over the phone, who immediately finds it unusual that Seyoung would call her even though he has never wanted to get treated for these past 2 years. The woman, Bora, reveals that when Seyoung called her, she was on a blind date with a rich man. As she picked up the call, she heard 2 words coming from Seyoung's mouth, "Help me." So as a dutiful health consultant, she had to ditch her date, who, to be fair, was kind of ugly and fat, so no losses there. Currently at Seyoung's rooftop room, Bora sees that Seyoung's arms have badly swollen up, and taking a primary look at it, she assumes that he has somehow sprained the ligaments of his wrists. But Seyoung states that not only his arms, but also his hips and backs have swollen up, claiming that he was doing exercises when that happened. Bora finds it hard to believe that a shut-in who hasn't stepped outside of the front door for the past 2 years would be out exercising and begins to laugh at Seyoung, thinking that he is lying to her. But she still finds it unusual that his entire body would get damaged by doing any exercise, and she gets curious to learn exactly what this boy did. Seyoung's phone rings, but because he is unable to get up, Bora picks up the call, telling the person on the other side that she is his nurse in charge of his regular checkups. After getting Bora's details, the person on the other side asks how Seyoung is doing and asks questions about his screaming, indicating that he is his manager, who had learned about the situation from the apartment holders and neighbors. Bora tells the manager that Seyoung is doing fine and that his mental health is also alright. But the manager doesn't believe her, and so Bora redirects the call over to Seyoung, who himself tells the manager not to worry about him. Bora hangs up the call after learning that the tenants here have been complaining for the past couple of days because of the screaming and noises that Seyoung has been causing in the middle of the night for the past couple of days. She asks Seyoung about the screams and noises, but he claims that it's nothing and once again lies, saying that he was exercising. Bora, who wants to scold Seyoung for acting recklessly, stops herself as she remembers the time when Seyoung could barely eat after recovering from his coma. So now that he is getting better and calmer, she feels glad and treats his swollen ligaments with bandages and casts, instructing him to change them only when necessary. Telling him that she will come again to check up on him 2 weeks later, she takes her leave even though Seyoung doesn't want that, as he knows he will recover by that time and will have to give Bora money for the checkup for no reason. Later that day, Seyoung, who had put the sword under the bed to keep it hidden from Bora, brings it out, showing how obsessed he has become with it already, and then puts it on the bed with the last bit of energy that he has. His arm starts to ache again because of forcefully using it. But at that moment, the voice of the hero commends him for not backing out and not giving up. Of course, Seyoung has no idea about the identity of the voice in his head, so he demands to know who is speaking to him. But the voice doesn't give him that answer and continues motivating him, telling him to run with the sword and swing the sword as much as possible if he wants to have the sword's power for himself. Seyoung, who doesn't understand how he is supposed to become powerful just by swinging the sword, goes on the internet and looks up many articles regarding two-handed swords to learn more about how the users become strong just by mastering the sword. Realizing that he will need to follow a similar regime in order to become powerful, he wonders how he is going to do so since his entire body is already aching with intolerable pain. A week goes by, and Bora comes to check up on him again when she finds out that his body has healed completely, even though normally it takes about a total of 3 weeks in order to heal. So she assumes that Seyoung took some illegal medicine to become better without telling, but Seyoung explains that that isn't the case but doesn't elaborate. So Bora takes off, advising Seyoung not to overdo his exercises again just because he can now move freely once again. After giving Seyoung a good scolding, she slams the door on him and leaves his place. With her gone, Seyoung gets up, revealing that his being all weak and frail today was just an act, so that she didn't suspect him or anything. He also reveals that his wounds healed up completely in less than a week. As he realizes that the sword will also make him strong and mighty, he gets determined to train and goes outside on the roof to swing his war sword. But as he still finds it hard to lift the sword using both hands, he decides to build his strength and stamina first to become worthy of being the wielder of the sword. But in order to build up stamina, he will have to run, which means that he will have to go to the outside world, which he has abandoned for the past 2 years. He chickens out even by thinking of using the stairs to go down, and so he decides to build his stamina later. But he knows that the hero from his memory used to run for an hour carrying this war sword when he was his age. So in order to become more like the hero, Seyoung musters up some courage in him, attaches the sword to his back, and decides to do 3 sets of 10 push-ups to build his strength. But knowing clearly that he has no strength, he reduces the amount to only 1 set of 10 push-ups, but fails to do even one because his hips and waist give up before his will. Acknowledging how pathetic he is, Seyoung returns to his room in disappointment, eats some food, and in the evening heads out again, this time determined to build his stamina first. He carries the sword on his back again and goes in front of the stairway door, revealing his intent to venture into the outside world for the first time in the past 2 years. As he enters the stairway, he carefully puts his foot on each step, as he has forgotten completely how to walk downward. While struggling to even move, he accidentally knocks himself over and rolls all over to the 5th floor, leading everyone to wonder how this guy didn't end up in a coma again. Seyoung, who is still determined to become stronger, whatever it may take, gets up with the desperate need to continue running. After climbing all the way down for more than an hour of struggle, rest, and hesitation, Seyoung chooses to fall back to the rooftop instead. Extreme exhaustion takes over, but he persists, as giving up here means not being able to take revenge on his 8 assailants. With his parents' scene burning inside of him, no pun intended, Seyoung becomes determined to go back to the stairway one more time and makes a full round trip from downstairs to upstairs. He follows the same regime for the next few weeks and increases his overall strength and stamina. No longer considering himself a shut-in, he throws out all of the trash bags on the road for the cleaners to pick them up. He appears to have a more muscular body now, which makes him look less like an undead skeleton. Unlike before, he cooks food for himself and consistently does muscle-building exercises whenever he gets the chance. His appetite has increased as he reveals that he is hungry all the time, even though he eats a lot now. Most importantly, he can now do a total of 100 push-ups, whereas a few weeks ago he couldn't even do a half push-up. Finding peace and ecstasy in the painful training, Seyoung keeps going and becomes even stronger over time. He runs from the top floor stairs to the ground floor stairs every night for a total of 8 rounds, but he doesn't even break a sweat. Then, following his regular routine, he swings the war sword 100 times. The voice of the hero, or to be more precise, the memories of the hero inside Seyoung's head, instructs him to swing the blade as slowly as possible, because in that way he will be able to fully master the blade's movements. The voice then asks Seyoung what his end goal is and why he is trying to become strong. In response to his obvious dumb question, Seyoung reveals his purpose, stating that he wants revenge. Revenge for the beating he took, revenge for the endless sufferings his parents have been through, revenge for the unjust law, and revenge for his parents' deaths. The hero's memories show that the hero has also been through a path of revenge because of loss and regrets, just like Seyoung, because his only son and wife have also been burned down alongside his house. Seeing the hero's memories in his sleep, Seyoung wakes up with teary eyes. However, such memories only help him become more stern and committed to his path to seek revenge. On the other hand, Seyoung's nurse, Bora, sneaks in front of his rooftop room, sending him a message that she will be coming there in an hour when she is actually in front of his front door. Hoping to surprise him, she comes close to the door, but gets surprised herself as Seyoung comes out in his new bulky body, telling her to come inside. Bora checks up on him and sees that his blood pressure is very high. She then asks him about his physical condition, and in response, Seyoung tells her that every part of his body hurts a little. But now that Bora knows that Seyoung is in perfect health condition and has fully recovered, she doesn't fall for his lies and tells him to go back to studying at middle school instead of goofing off. Although Seyoung is pretty old for middle school now, there is still the possibility that he will get bullied like last time, which led to his coma. She advises that he make some good friends this time who will protect him when necessary. Seyoung, whose school life has turned into his PTSD, gets furious and makes it clear to Bora with his strong words that he will never be returning to school ever again. Bora, who is too focused on Seyoung's height, completely ignores what he just said and asks how he went from being 5 feet 1 to 6 feet 5. She also notices how muscular he has become, making her realize that the boy is lifting weights. She even presses his chest, because that action doesn't fall under molestation. Hey, is anyone going to call men's rights activist here for Seyoung, please? Being pleased by how much Seyoung has grown, Bora takes her leave, hoping that she will have a taste of the once undead skeleton's mini-muscular skeleton one day. He continues training with his heart set on strength and forces himself past his limits to obtain the war sword's first power through the Pledge of Indomitability, in which he will have to swing the sword a total of 10,000 times in a day without pausing. If he manages to do so, The voice tells him that he will be able to receive the blessing of the sword. Apparently, that blessing will bring unlimited power to his body. So Seyoung keeps training and training for the next 12 months. The country holds a generational election and elects their new president, who, just like any other lying politician, tells his citizens that he will be changing the country for the greater good. The new president, Jang Sung-chul, who claims to be all about justice and law, gets a call from President Lee of the Shinjin Group, who, if I remember correctly, is one of the parents of Seyoung's assailants. Remember when Seyoung was looking up the names of the companies that helped the assailants flee from their punishments? The Shinjin Group was one of them. President Lee congratulates Sung-chul on winning the election and reveals to us that he was the one who pulled a lot of strings in order to make Sung-chul the president because they are apparently members of the same family. Speaking of family, Lee invites Sung-chul to a family get-together and tells him to bend the rules and laws in such a way that the 8 kids who fled to the United States can come back. The president also thinks that those 8 kids have had a hard time in the United States and thinks that they should get back as soon as possible. However, I don't agree with this guy because I know for a fact that those kids dated a lot, went out partying, and lived basically the dream of any struggling Asian. Lee is glad that Sung-chul thinks the same way as he does, but finds it quite natural as Sung-chul's own daughter is one of the assailants who were sent to the United States. After ending the call with Lee, Sung-chul tells his assistant to make preparations for his daughter Soo-jung's glorious return and starts laughing like a total maniac. Soon after, at the Incheon International Airport, 3 spoiled brats, Yoo-jin, Jun-hyuk, and Soho, make their return and are greeted by Hien, Dan, and Chang-soo, who have also returned from the United States from the flight before. As the 6 of them reunite, they wonder where the other 2, Shun and Soo-jung, are, asking Yoo-jin if they didn't come with them. Yoo-jin claims to not know where they are exactly, but from what she has heard, she assumes that they are somewhere off in Japan because they wanted to calm their minds before coming back to Korea. Apparently, Soo-yen, who wants to cool his head, has been doing the same thing for the past 2 years, meaning that he is just goofing around and wasting her papa's hard-earned money. They move on to the main topic, which is finding the person who caused them so much trouble, Seyoung. They reveal their intentions to take revenge on Seyoung and make a solid plan so that no evidence can be traced this time. On the other hand, Seyoung's aunt calls Seyoung over the phone, and upon learning that he no longer wants to go back to school, she becomes concerned for him, as education is the basic necessity for a man to succeed. So she advises her dear nephew to not ruin his life like that, and if it helps, she offers him to come stay with her family abroad. Seyoung appreciates her kind offer but still rejects it, telling her that he is still afraid of the outside world even after 3 years after the initial incident. But he assures her that he will be fine soon, telling her not to worry about him anymore. As Seyoung ends the call with his hands, he gets back to focusing on his main goal, which is to crush all of his enemies one by one. And now that he knows they will return to Korea since the president of the country is now one of the assailants' fathers, he makes the necessary preparations to enact revenge. In the meantime, a man comes in front of Seyoung's apartment building and reveals that his team in black has been observing the location from different locations all day to ensure that no one has been entering or leaving. After concluding that there are no signs of Seyoung coming outside or going inside, they assume that either Seyoung is not living in this location or he has just locked himself somewhere inside. Figuring out that the loser never steps out of his rooftop room, the man in black reports the situation to 2 of the assailants, whose goal is to take revenge on Seyoung. As they learn that Seyoung doesn't even go to school anymore, they wonder if they should make their attack team barge into Seyoung's apartment and drag him out to them. But knowing that the absolute psycho Soo-hyun, who is in Japan right now, has better ideas to torture Seyoung, they hold off on their plan for now, revealing that Soo-hyun has become a member of the notorious Japanese mafia gang, the Yakuza. Seyoung, on the other hand, finds the post of the assailant group, which shows that they have regrouped with the exception of Soo-hyun and Soo-jung, who are still abroad. He gets so furious seeing their happy faces that it makes him twitch. So to get rid of their smile, he gets ready and waits for Soo-hyun and Soo-jung to also make their return. On the other side, the 2 lead villains make their entrance to Japan at the Narita International Airport, where they are greeted by 2 new friends who are affiliated with the Yakuza. As they all get inside the car, the Yakuza friends get to the point, as they know Soo-hyun is not a fan of chit-chatting, and he informs them that they have already told their older brother, who is an influential member of Yakuza, about their arrival in Japan. One of them, named Ryuhei, still can't believe that the daughter of South Korea's president is now their friend. but Seyoung thinks that it's only natural that they are friends because they have the same goal of achieving power. They discuss how they are going to be operating in Japan as Yakuzas when suddenly Seyoung gets the message from one of his assailant friends that they are about to mess with Seyoung first and apologizes beforehand for playing with their toy first. Meanwhile, two men in black are sent to kidnap Seyoung from his apartment at midnight, and upon reaching there, they discuss who will be picking up the lock of Seyoung's house. While talking about such minor details, they enter the building being completely pissed that professionals like them are assigned such baby tasks as kidnapping a middle schooler. However, what they don't know is that Seyoung is not your ordinary middle schooler. He is overpowered. One of the two kidnappers breaks in inside the apartment main building and comes to the rooftop alone when he sees that the room Seyoung lies in doesn't even have a window, making him wonder how a person even lives in such a horrid place. The door to Seyoung's room suddenly opens, making the kidnapper assume that nobody is inside as the lights are off as well. However, Seyoung, who reveals to be waiting patiently to ambush the kidnapper from the darkness, takes care of the matter soon. Meanwhile, the bald kidnapper, who has been waiting for more than minutes in front of the building, wonders why it took his partners so long to kidnap a middle schooler, not knowing that the middle schooler has actually kidnapped his partner. He heads inside to see if something has gone wrong and comes to the rooftop, where he finds the door to Seyoung's room open. Assuming that it's his partner who has left the door open and is inside to neutralize the kid, Baldi too casually enters the room, leaving his guard wide open. But that turns out to be his biggest mistake, as Seyoung's hand grabs his mouth like a predator tiger and snatches him inside his lair. The next day, the police find the kidnapper's car still parked outside of Seyoung's apartment building. But seeing the license plate, they realize that it's a rented car with no ownership to anyone's name, so they call up the tow truck instead to take it away. Apparently in Korea, guys who drive these rental cars occasionally leave them on the road and never come back to pick them up, so the police naturally think that might be the case and do not investigate further, which turns out to be lucky for Seyoung. Meanwhile, the two assailants, Jun Hyuk and Chang-soo, who are still waiting for their men to bring Seyoung to them, get a message from Seyoung, who tells them not to hurt Seyoung as she wants to be the first one to play with her old toy. They decide not to tell her that their men haven't captured and brought back Seyoung yet. Getting impatient, they call their uncle, who is in charge of the secret agents team, and tell him that the two men he sent them to do the task haven't returned yet. Their uncle, Choi Jong, who is the president of a famous company, learns that his men haven't returned yet, making him wonder if something has gone wrong. Chang-soo, whose father is in a higher position than his uncle Choi Jong, threatens to make him pay if he keeps on failing them. So Choi Jong quickly calls up his two men, who don't pick up the call, as they reveal being beaten to a pulp by the new terrifying version of Seyoung. Soo-jung and Soo-hyun come back to Korea soon and get greeted by Ho-jung, who is from the Secret Service. As the woman takes Soo-jung away to bring her to her father, another man approaches Soo-hyun, revealing himself to be his teacher. Chang-soo's uncle Choi calls up one of the agents, Yeom, who is very skilled at jobs like assassination, and tells him that the two rookies he sent yesterday to Seyoung's house haven't been answering their calls and are basically out of reach. Yeom asks his subordinates if they have heard from the two kidnappers, but after learning that none of them have been able to reach them, he takes matters into his own hands and goes straight to Seyoung's house to investigate. In front of the house, he notices a legal poster regarding a car being towed, making Yeom realize by seeing the registration number that the two kidnappers did come here. But what he doesn't understand is how and why they didn't come back to their car. As he realizes that something must have happened to them during their kidnapping, he wonders if there is something dangerous hidden in Seyoung's apartment building. Choi, being totally enraged at all of his subordinates, comes directly to Yeom's office looking for him as he personally wants to give him a good beating for getting humiliated by his nephew. One of his subordinates who is at the office and sees the president of their agency coming there becomes baffled by his president, as such a powerful man like him usually never steps foot there. So the subordinate asks the president what brings him here today, and upon learning that he is here looking for Yeom, the guy reveals that Yeom has gone out with all of his subordinates on a mission, implying that he has taken all his members to Seyoung's apartment after sensing the danger. Yeom himself calls up Choi and informs him that the two kidnappers he had sent to Seyoung's building have actually gone missing. And that is why he has called out all of the members to check out what is inside this building that has caused all of the members to have gone missing out of the blue. Understanding the issue at hand, Choi gives Yeom permission to check the building himself, so Seyoung, without any hesitation, gives his entire time to scavenge the building. As all the 50 men break through to the rooftop of the building in under a few minutes, Seyoung, who is behind them, starts hearing gasping and screaming noises coming from them, making him realize that a fight is going on there. Once he reaches the rooftop, the sound stops, making him realize that the fight is already over. But what he doesn't realize is that his team is on the losing end, not Seyoung. And as the complete buffed mad lad makes his entry in front of Seyoung, he wets his pants, begging to know what kind of phenomenon this guy is able to beat so many people who are skilled at fighting in mere seconds. Seyoung doesn't let him have the satisfaction of getting an answer and punches him straight in the face, knocking him out in an instant and ending the fight. Soon after, one of the tenants at Seyoung's building reports to the police that she has seen many gang members who have gone inside the building but haven't come out yet. She also reports to them about the screaming and shouting she hears in the middle of the night, which has ruined her entire family's sleep. So the police decide to check the place out to see if there is actually any problem or if the lady is just a Karen and can't seem to mind her own business. The two officers find the gate to the roof locked, and one of them notices on the stairway that the lock has been picked, meaning that something bad has definitely happened here. So they immediately knock on the door to the rooftop, telling Seyoung to open it. He complies with their orders and opens up the door, revealing that he has gotten taller than the gate, which intimidates the two officers. One of the officers immediately pointed his gun at Seyoung after noticing that behind him were the lying, blood-raised bodies of the gang members who had reportedly come here last night. Shortly after, many police officers and a rescue team arrive in front of Seyoung's house and take the bodies of all the gang members to the hospital. Choi arrives there and becomes completely shocked to see that all of his subordinates, including Seyoung, are eliminated. Meanwhile, the police officers interrogate Seyoung on the rooftop, asking for his ID, but he claims to not have any, stating that he is still underage. He also elaborates by informing the police officer that he used to attend a middle school but took a break during his second year there. But he doesn't give them the reason, as that past still haunts him. The police officer calls the higher-up and tells him about the incident involving Seyoung. Hearing that Seyoung is involved in the gang member's disappearance case, the higher-up tells the officer to withdraw from his apartment building immediately, telling him not to arrest a minor who has been the center of attention in this country 3 years ago as well. So if they do arrest him, the news and media will go crazy again and hold the police force responsible for letting the gang members invade Seyoung's private property in the first place. With no other option left, the police offer to withdraw from the place, telling Seyoung to no longer cause any trouble. Seyoung, who also realizes that he went overboard too much, calls his aunt and tells her that he wants to come stay with her in the United States. But before his aunt can tell his uncle about it, he stops her, saying that he doesn't want to go just yet as he has some unfinished business to deal with. Giving her the reason, he says that he will be traveling the entire country for a year first. His aunt tells him that he should really focus on getting back to studying as he is about to become an adult who hasn't finished middle school yet. But still, Seyoung begs her to let him do so and promises to be a good boy once his mission is done. After getting her silent approval, Seyoung tells her not to worry about him and hangs up the call. On the other hand, Junhyo calls Changsu and calls him a total loser for not being able to kidnap Seyoung yet. Changsu gets mad as he doesn't want to be called a loser and wonders what he should do to fix his mistake, which was letting his uncle Choi do the dirty things for him. Soo Hyun's manager calls Changsu, telling him that Soo-hyun wants to meet him and specifically asking him to bring all the information about Seyoung. Once Changsu delivers all of the information related to Seyoung and his current status, Soo-hyun tells Suho, who is another one of the assailants, to send the pictures to Ryo-hae, the Yakuza guy, giving him the task of finding Seyoung. Soo-jung questions whether leaving the task to the Japanese mafia is safe, and as Soo-hyun assures her that they are pros who never leave any traces in their operations, she is relieved and can rest assured that they won't have to run back to the United States if they are caught committing a crime. Soo-hyun then moves on from that topic and asks Changsu what Junhyuk meant earlier when he said he was going to play with their toy Seyoung first. Being hesitant to answer, Changsu lies, saying that he isn't sure. However, Soo-hyun doesn't put his trust in the lies this loser is spouting. Suho, on the other hand, gets the news that the Yakuza team is on their way to Seyoung's house and will bring him back to them in under an hour. This news brings an evil smile to Soo-hyun's face. He cannot wait to torture his old victim once again. The Yakuza team of 2 guys arrives in front of Seyoung's apartment building and heads to the rooftop. Their prior information about their target was that he was just an 18-year-old shut-in kid, but upon seeing the blood-raised roof, they realized that their target isn't just some normal guy, which means they cannot afford to take things lightly. As cheap Saitama gets ready to enter the rooftop room to deal with Seyoung himself, the Alibaba Express Yujiro, the ogre, stops him, claiming to be stronger than Saitama. Being a beast himself, Yujiro senses a violent beast residing inside the rooftop room, so he gives Saitama a heads up, telling him to be careful. Accordingly, Saitama puts his guard up, but then Seyoung comes out of nowhere and smashes Saitama's face so hard with one punch that he renders him unconscious instantly. The ogre, who realizes that he cannot allow Seyoung to move, attacks him immediately from behind. Seyoung doesn't even care and takes the punch head-on, showing him that the Japanese Anon guys are no longer on the list of being the strongest anymore. He retaliates with a punch to Yujiro's face and also smashes his face into a pulp with one go, making it crystal clear that he cannot be messed with. Saitama gets up, being beaten over the fact that his friend was beaten just like that. However, Seyoung doesn't let him do anything about it, and once again knocks him out with another deadly blow. Soo-hyun, who is still waiting for Saitama and Yujiro to come back with Seyoung, asks their leader Takashi why they haven't come back yet, even though the time has passed an hour already. Takashi, with a confident smile on his face, tells Soo-hyun not to worry as he claims that his two subordinates are pros among the pros who have no record of failing before. But his smile quickly fades away as he receives a direct call from Seyoung, who demands his location, telling him that if he doesn't give his location to him, he will murder both Yujiro and Saitama. Acknowledging the threat, Takashi immediately ends the call, realizing that if a guy can beat Yujiro, he can beat any one of them. But Seyoung still manages to get Takashi's location from Saitama, who basically escorts him to the location as he is scared to death. Seyoung, who clearly cannot fit inside a car, rips off the roof of the car, sits inside, and only then heads to Takashi's location, this time while having the war's word with him, indicating that he won't be sparing any one of them. Takashi, in the meantime, tells Soo-hyun and his friends to leave the place for their own safety, revealing to them that they have completely failed the mission. However, Soo-hyun doesn't cooperate, as he doesn't think anything is dangerous about staying here, unsurprisingly acting like a brat who doesn't know that people around him do things for their own good. The fact that Takashi has failed to bring the shut-in middle schooler to them makes Soo-hyun furious, so he starts shouting at Takashi, which ends up wasting enough time for Seyoung to arrive there just in time. Telling Saitama to lead the way to the 8th floor, where Soo-hyun and 3 other assailants currently are, he starts walking towards there. The pedestrians there, who are completely overwhelmed by the sheer gladiator-like appearance of Seyoung, assume that someone must be shooting a movie since he is also carrying quite a long sword. They begin to film Seyoung in order to post it on social media with the hope that it will go viral. But when they notice that inside the car that Seyoung used to come here is Yujiro, whose face is disfigured, they realize that this young man is someone terrifying, dangerous, and strong who potentially can also bring harm to them. Takashi, who finally manages to make Soo-hyun understand that they will have to evacuate before the enemy comes here, tells him that there are a total of 3 stairways to get out of this building. To maximize their chances of being safe, Soo-hyun suggests that all of them split up. But the chicken with green hair thinks that staying together is the better option, as he is certain that Takashi here can save them in case they end up running into their enemy. However, Soo-hyun doesn't agree with his idea and makes him understand why he chose to split up, telling him that if even one of them manages to run down and call their people or even the police, it will have a 100% chance of survival. I mean, you can just use a cell phone to call them here. Soo-jung decides to go with Soo-hyun, as she thinks of him as her only protector. So Soo-hyun tells the other 2 assailants, Suho and Chansu, to take the other 2 stairs, telling Takashi to come with him and Soo-jung. Changsu makes a run for it, cursing Soo-hyun for not staying together, and runs into a black figure in the stairway. On the other hand, Soo-hyun makes sure that Takashi has a gun and tells him not to hesitate to use it if the enemy appears in front of them. However, when they reach the exit, they find not Seyoung but the police, who arrest them. Seyoung, on the other side, reveals himself to be the black figure and successfully captures Changsu, who doesn't recognize him at all. He also sees that Saitama's skull has been completely deformed because of Seyoung's punches, which makes him realize that this dude is a total monster. Speaking of this dude, Seyoung's heart is filled with rage, as he cannot believe that the guy who has destroyed his life and his parents don't even recognize him. The police force surrounds them as they have been given the anonymous tip that a man has taken Chang-soo hostage. One of the officers takes the mic and tells Seyoung that whoever he might be, he should release Chang-soo. He also asks Seyoung why he is doing this. Chang-soo asks Seyoung the same question as well. This time, being totally infuriated by the guy's insolence, Seyoung reveals to be the guy they had bullied in middle school every day and had beaten up to death 3 years ago. Chang-soo, of course, doesn't believe that the frail, weak, small, introverted loser is this bulky Superman with a long sword. 2 police helicopters close their distance to Seyoung, and after identifying him, they tell the head officer of the rescue mission about him. The witnesses there who are confused by Seyoung's answer again the question why he is doing this. So Seyoung reminds them about the incident with his parents, when they sacrificed their lives by burning themselves to death in order to get justice. However, no actual justice was brought to these 8 assailants, who deserved much worse than death. Therefore, Seyoung takes it upon himself to bring actual justice and brings out his longsword, putting it on top of Chang-soo's neck, and makes him beg for his life. While keeping the heavy sword on top of his neck, Seyoung continues to tell this story to the world, telling them that he will make every single one of the bystanders feel what his parents felt when nobody came to their side and helped them. Standing there in front of the world, Seyoung takes an oath to make everyone pay with their lives. His message gets sent to all of the people in South Korea, who instead of being concerned about the hostage situation, focus on how a middle schooler has grown to become so strong and tall. The emergency broadcast brings attention to many people who are beginning to investigate this case. Apparently, Chang-soo is the son of the president of the top security squad, named Aegis Security, which means that the entire country will be in danger if Chang-soo is hurt, as his father is a very influential man. But what's more dangerous is Seyoung, who clearly isn't playing any stupid games, so the officer asks him if he is up for any negotiations, but upon learning that Seyoung is only here to make a statement to the world and has no other demands, they decide to hear what he has to say. Seyoung announces to the world that he will be ending the lives of all of his 8 bullies, Soo-hyun, Soo-jung, Jun-hyuk, Yoo-jin, Soo-oh, Da-hun, Hyun, and Chang-soo, including their influential parents and their entire family, who helped them escape being punished by the law. He is so confident, as a matter of fact, that he states that even if the country issues military action in order to protect those 8 assailants, he will still break through everything as he has now become death himself, making it clear that no matter what, no one will be able to stop him from achieving his goal. Seyoung asks Chang-soo if he has any last words. Chang-soo, in response, tells him that if he tries to hurt him any further, his dad will find him and torture him so much that he will be left begging for his death. Seyoung can't believe that this brat is so full of himself even at his death, so he decapitates him, announcing war against the entire corrupted nation. At the construction site, Seyoung announces to the world, to the police surrounding him, and to the news media helicopters buzzing around, his declaration of war. He then lifts his sword and in one fell swoop, brings it down on Chang-soo's neck. Chang-soo's head falls from the building and onto the shocked onlookers below. A camera quickly focuses on the head with the stunned reporters shaking in terror and disbelief. After a few seconds of shock, the first piercing scream reverberates throughout the city. Meanwhile, Seyoung just calmly stabs his sword into the floor and stares outward. In his office, Chang-soo's father, Kim Sang-pil, is watching the news with horror. Upon seeing the death of his son, he slams the iPad down onto his deck and slams his fist into it. He promises to bring vengeance to his son while tears fall down his cheeks. In another office, the 21st president of South Korea and Sung Chul's father is also shaking in anger at what he's watching. He calmly dials his phone and calls the police commissioner. When he learned from the commissioner that the execution had just truly occurred, he angrily berated the police for not shooting and murdering Seyoung yet. Back in the city, the police negotiator is still thinking about what he should do next when he hears the orders to shoot and murder Seyoung. This surprises him, but the sniper teams surrounding the area had already gotten in position. SWAT teams also assembled beside him with their rifles trained on Seyoung. Seyoung was about to address them again when a shot suddenly hit his face. Everyone was surprised again while the sniper team reported their success. However, it turns out that Seyoung managed to block the bullet with his sword at the very last second. The order to shoot was given again, and despite the police negotiator disagreeing with the idea, he orders the SWAT team to fire. The police unload their rifles at the building, filling every available space with lethality. but Seyoung was moving like a blur, and the negotiator could only watch as Seyoung jumped high into the air and away from the site. As he was falling, Seyoung then sticks his sword onto another building and stops his momentum. The police trucks quickly followed him onto the new location, but Seyoung was just calmly waiting for them. He then warns them that everyone getting in the way of his revenge will also die. As the trucks drive towards him, Seyoung pulls back his arm and throws his sword in one powerful swing. The sword cuts the first truck in half while impaling itself on the second one right behind it. The impaled truck was blown back into the air, but Seyoung was already running after it. He then jumps, pulls his sword out from the vehicle, and swings it again in one motion. Another truck gets immediately sliced in half and explodes violently. The police negotiator shields his face from the blast, but his whole body quivers when he sees something step out of the flames. It was Seyoung, unaffected by the heat and glaring right towards them. The police negotiator has no idea what to think anymore. How could someone survive that? Is Seyoung still even a human? Seyoung is still walking towards them, so the police negotiator has no choice but to grit his teeth and orders his men to shoot. Seyoung leaped up from the hail of bullets so fast that it seemed he disappeared. They all look around, but Seyoung suddenly lands behind them, crushing two policemen under his sword. The police turn around and aim their rifles at Seyoung, while the police negotiator orders the snipers to take the shot. The snipers aim precisely at Seyoung's head for a quick takedown and fire the bullet. The bullet travels quickly, faster than anyone can even comprehend. And yet, Seyoung looks towards the bullet coming straight for him and places his sword on its path. The bullet gets cut in half, striking uselessly on the floor. The police negotiator shouts to everyone to do everything they can to stop him. Every policeman there knows that they are battling an uncontrollable monster. They know how much destruction he has caused and their impending deaths. So when Seyoung starts to move, they can only scream and fire their shaking guns. Seyoung runs towards the firing policemen, dodging their shots. He then swings his sword at the group, blowing everyone away. Seyoung's easy and callous destruction is all caught on camera by the news crew still reporting on the scene. However, this scary situation is now too much for them, and they immediately run away, throwing away everything that slows them down. The camera, now abandoned, lands on the street, but still broadcasting each and every murder Seyoung makes. In another room somewhere in the city, Seyoung is shaking in fear at the TV. Beside him, Seyoung is already curled up with a blanket, terrorized and traumatized. Seyoung's words keep repeating in their minds, and how he promised he will hunt each and every one of them. Meanwhile, back in Seyoung's location, a few minutes have passed. Firefighters have appeared to quell the raging inferno from the destroyed vehicles, while emergency responders give first aid to the injured police. A few meters away, the police negotiator and team leader slams his subordinate onto the wall. He demands to know what his subordinate and Seyoung talked about earlier. After Seyoung decimated the police force, this subordinate was the only one left conscious. The subordinate reveals to his superior that Seyoung just asked him for the location of the other kids that got out. Due to his fear, the subordinate has no choice but to tell him that the kids were evacuated to the nearby Shingen University Hospital. The team leader couldn't believe his subordinate's cowardice, and he punches him in the face. Afterward, he quickly tells their headquarters that Seyoung is headed towards the hospital. In the hospital, Seyoung and Seyoung are still in their room, paralyzed by fear. Unbeknownst to them, outside their window, Seyoung is already watching them from afar. Inside Seyoung's room, the two friends watch as the news reports how Seyoung had escaped from the crime scene. Currently, the murderer's location is unknown. This tidbit of news sends a spike of fear tingling down their spines. Seyoung is so powerless compared to Seyoung that he can only curse at the air over their current situation. Their hospital room door opens and a cold-looking woman comes in. Seyoung questions who they are, but more and more black-suited men enter. The woman explains that they are from the Presidential Secret Service. A couple of men carry Seyoung, while another advises Seyoung to follow them. They quickly leave the room, while Seyoung is still watching from outside. When he sees them leaving, Seyoung steps down from the rooftop he was on. Meanwhile, the team leader's warning for everyone about Seyoung's next target finally reaches the Secret Service's ears. They now know that Seyoung is coming for them. An agent signals for them to stop walking, but all of a sudden, Seyoung comes crashing in from outside the window. Seyoung even managed to glare at them while hurling through the air. He then crashes into the opposite wall, causing stone and glass to fly everywhere. Seyoung had actually jumped from all the way down the front entrance into the top floor corridor. The Secret Service readies themselves while watching the hole Seyoung just made. When Seyoung starts coming out of it, the agents' jaws drop and they shake in fear. Despite being the best on their fields, Seyoung still towers over them like some form of god. Seyoung even looks past them and directly at his targets, Soo-hyun and Soo-jung. Soo-jung stumbles back in fear, but the woman's Secret Service just grabs his jacket and pulls him back the way they came from. With her is another agent carrying Soo-hyun. She wants to lead them to the elevators on the other side of the building. Meanwhile, every other secret agent stays behind and blocks Seyoung's way. Seyoung had no idea why they were running. His memories flash back to how his own parents, despite immense influence from his bullies' parents, never gave up. They stood firm for his sake and didn't choose to run. He screams at Soo-hyun while the woman orders the other agents to shoot Seyoung. The agents pull their guns out, but Seyoung's fists are all faster. Their skulls cave in from Seyoung's punches, and one was even sent out of the window. The other agents managed to aim their guns and started shooting. Meanwhile, the woman slams his hand in the elevator buttons, hoping it moves faster. They can hear their comrades dying just from the corridor. Before the elevator doors close, a wounded agent stumbles into their sight begging for help. His jaw is broken and hanging from where Seyoung punched him. His hand reaches out when the wounded agent suddenly gets pierced by a huge sword. The traumatic scene renders everyone in the elevator speechless. They wonder if they are still fighting a human being. Soo-hyun notices the elevator going down and asks the agents why they aren't going up towards a helicopter. Before someone can answer him, the whole elevator shakes violently as if someone dropped them. They look up and wonder what could have happened. Above them, standing on the elevator's roof, is Seyoung readying to plunge his sword down. The woman agent quickly realizes that Seyoung must be on top of them. He tells everyone to duck just a few seconds before the sword pierces through the ceiling and towards them. Thankfully, no one was hit. She tells everyone to run the moment the elevator doors open at the first floor. Meanwhile, Seyoung just pulls out his sword and pierces it through the ceiling again and again. When the elevator finally stops at the first floor, Soo-hyun quickly runs out screaming. The others follow after, but when the last agent carrying Soo-jung stands ready to run, the sword pierced him in the shoulder. With his last strength, the agent throws Soo-jung away from the elevator. A second later, the ceiling gives way and crushes the agent. The female agent helps Soo-jung stand up, and they try to hobble away from the destroyed elevator. They haven't gotten a few meters when Seyoung walks out, angrier than ever. He asks his two former bullies where they think they're going. A Humvee then crashes into the building's glass walls and drives through it, crashing into Seyoung. Seyoung parries it with his sword, but the Humvee manages to fling him away into the opposite wall. The driver's Humvee steps out and Soo-hyun recognizes him as a member of their company Shinjin Group and one of his father's subordinates, Teacher Yang. Yang tells them to get inside the vehicle before Seyoung can return, but Seyoung recovers quickly before they can all leave. Yang orders them to go ahead, and when his driver doesn't want to leave, he yells at him to leave. When the Humvee drives away, Seyoung starts walking after it, but Yang shouts after him. He pulls out a gun and starts shooting Seyoung, which finally catches his attention. Yang pulls out a knife with his other hand and warns Seyoung that if he's after the kids, he first has to go through him. Before he can even finish his sentence, Seyoung is already punching him into the wall. Outside the hospital, the Humvee is already driving far away with its escorts. They look at the rearview mirror and are relieved when they don't see Seyoung anywhere. The female agent then receives instructions to head toward Yeongdong-daegyo Bridge. It is their nearest secure path. The female agent relays the instructions to the driver, but Yang's driver protests. They have their own secure ways. Their argument stops when something behind them explodes and Seyoung is once again in the air behind them giving pursuit. Seyoung hides the convoy on the bridge and spots the Humvee. He directs his momentum towards it and lands perfectly on top, crushing the vehicle beneath him. However, it was a decoy Humvee. Soo-hyun and the agent look behind them and see Seyoung. They're almost through the bridge, so they just need to delay Seyoung a little longer. The female agent asks Yang's driver to do anything they need to stop Seyoung. The back door of one of their escort vehicles opens and another person aims a weapon at Seyoung. The female agent couldn't believe what she saw. Soo-hyun's father's company, the Shinjin Group who rescued them, has access to grenade launchers. How can a civilian company have access to military-grade weapons? The grenade launcher fires at Seyoung and it swallows him in a fiery explosion. Soo-hyun smiles since Seyoung shouldn't be able to survive a direct hit. However, Seyoung suddenly drops from above and lands on the hood of their Humvee. Soojin screams in fear upon seeing him, but Seyoung just cleaves through the vehicle's roof, exposing all of them. He lifts his sword once more and is about to bring it down on them when the female agent orders the driver to brake. The vehicle quickly stops while Seyoung gets flung ahead. Seyoung stabs his sword into the ground and stops himself. Everyone stares at each other when Seyoung hears noise from behind. Looking behind him, Seyoung realizes that they are very near the edge of the bridge where military forces have congregated and are shooting smoke grenades at them. The grenade explodes, filling the whole bridge with concealing smoke in just a few seconds. The soldiers prepare to fire the moment Seyoung appears. However, Seyoung instead jumps high into the air and grabs hold of the bridge's steel beams. He hangs there upside down like a bath while glaring at his new enemies. The military quickly adjusts their aim and shoots at the boy. Seyoung jumps right through their bullets and crash lands into their midst, flinging some of them from the impact. Seyoung then addresses the others and advises them to leave if they value their lives. The soldier curses at him and starts firing once more. Meanwhile, a helicopter lands in the middle of the bridge. Soo-hyun, the female agent, and Soojin move to the waiting helicopter. Behind them, the policemen are being flung into the air like ants before Seyoung's mighty swings. He spots his target getting into the helicopter and pulls back his sword to throw it. However, he stops at the very last second. He doesn't want his bullies to die that way, thus he lets them fly into safety. Soo-hyun wipes away his tears and sweat from the terrifying chase. Meanwhile, the female agent just puts her arms around the still frightened Soo-hyun. Down below in the bridge, Seyoung quietly advises them to wait and let despair fill their hearts until he finds them again. In the president's residence in South Korea nicknamed the Blue House, high-ranking officials are watching footage from the battle. The only sound heard in the room are screams of terror from the policemen dying in battle. After the video ends, a speaker explains the situation. The suspect's name is Tak Seyoung, an 18-year-old boy. His last known location is the bridge, and they are currently investigating everything about him. Aside from that, they also connected Seyoung's incidents 3 years ago when he was a teen violence victim. Seyoung's parents then self-immolated in front of a camera to get media attention for their son's case. A military man speaks out and asks the presenter if they have any idea where Seyoung might be headed next. When the presenter couldn't answer, the man also asked where the president could be right now. It doesn't make sense that the president and one of the target's fathers are absent during their discussion. The presenter explains that the president is actually independently searching for a solution for their current crisis. In another building, at the headquarters of the Bluing Media Corp, another meeting is taking place. The attendees of these meetings are also watching Seyoung's threat against all his former bullies, their parents, and their families. The participants of this meeting are the influential parents Seyoung just threatened. This includes the chairman of Shinjin Group and Soo-hyun's father, Jo-yang, South Korea's president and Soo-jim's father, Sung-cheol, the chairman of Bluing Media, and Jun-hyuk's mother, Jung-suk, the top search engine company Goodfield's chairman and Yoojin's father, Jung-gu. The vice minister of revenue is also there, Hee-jung, who is Hyun's father, and the savings and loans company owner and father of Dae-yeon, Hyun-suk. The only one absent from their group is the president of the security Aegis company and the dead Chang-soo's father, Sang-pil. Their first order of business is to block everything related to the video so that it won't show up on the internet. For these, Bluing Media and Goodfield is in charge. Unfortunately, these two conglomerates wouldn't be able to block social media outside their control, so news will leak out sooner or later. What's most important is that they need to catch or eliminate Seyoung, or else the situation won't stabilize. Unfortunately, their enemy doesn't even flinch in front of guns, and rumors say he can even dodge bullets. Jo-yang points out that if Seyoung is bulletproof, then he wouldn't exert effort to dodge or run away from bullets. They already gave up on the police's help, so they decided to utilize the mercs and the military. After all, they're not only fighting for their children's lives but their own. If Seyoung isn't stopped, who among them would be the first to die to Seyoung's sword? As for Seyoung, he is currently in Gangneom Memorial Gardens carrying a small bag. Upon seeing him and recognizing him, the janitor tries to call the cops while shaking in terror. Meanwhile, Seyoung just heads into a particular grave and kneels in front of it. He greets his parents and apologizes for not visiting them first. His tears start to fall as he sobs out how much he misses them. He caresses the tombstone and assures them that he fully understands what he's doing. All they have to do is relax and watch him from heaven without worries. Police cars and SWAT trucks start congregating on the cemetery. Seyoung pays them no mind and just promises his parents that he won't forgive a single one of his bullies. he'll let them know despair or pain. Since they and the country didn't listen to his parents, then he won't listen to them or the country too. He wants the parents of his bullies to feel the pain of losing their children just as he endured the pain of losing his own parents. And so he wants to leave the son they love right in the cemetery with them. He lays out the items in his bag, which includes his old notebooks, shoes, caps, and other knickknacks. Nearby, the police team leader shouts from a megaphone that they have already surrounded him and ask him to surrender peacefully. However, Seyoung also wants them to know pain. Just like how they ignored his parents, he will let the country know how it feels when no one hears them crying out for help. Seyoung wipes away his tears and promises to punish everyone who has sinned against him. Military copters start appearing over the cemetery, and the police team leader warns Seyoung that if he doesn't surrender, the copters will start firing. Seyoung looks left, right, and up to see the various forces arrayed against him. When he still doesn't do anything, the helicopter's pilot decides to fire. Its rotary cannon starts spinning, and a barrage of bullets rain on Seyoung. Seyoung uses his sword to shield his body while the bullets destroy everything around him, kicking up a loud cover of dust in the process. The gun's red-hot barrels stop shooting as they wait for Seyoung's response. The team leader continues yelling at Seyoung to drop his sword. His eyes widen when he abruptly sees the sword thrown into the air and skewers the helicopter. Seyoung is questioning how dare they shoot in the place where his parents are resting. The damaged helicopter lazily comes crashing down right into the military truck's positions. Everyone shields their eyes from the ensuing explosions, and the team leader can see the burning, mangled bodies of his subordinates. Something fires from behind Seyoung, and the projectile immediately explodes upon hitting Seyoung. The team leader wonders what's happening, and to his surprise, a column of tanks are now positioned just outside the cemetery. However, Seyoung had also survived the tank cannon with just his shirt ripped from the explosion. He immediately leaps towards where the helicopter crashed and retrieves his sword. Military personnel surges forward without waiting for the team leader's orders. Meanwhile, Seyoung casually puts the sword between his teeth and readies himself on all fours as if he's in a wolf position. The team leader orders everyone to fire while Seyoung rushes toward them. In short, powerful leaps, Seyoung had jumped from person to person, slashing at each soldier he passes through. In the blink of an eye, every armed soldier around the team leader is now on the ground holding their spilled guts in. In the distance, the battalion commander is also watching the battle with fear in his eyes. A soldier approaches him and hands him a phone. When the commander answered it, it was from headquarters ordering him to capture Seyoung alive by any means necessary. If they are successful, Seyoung will become an important asset to their country. The battalion commander watches the Seyoung's continuing rampage, and he tries to explain to his superiors that capturing him isn't feasible. After all, Seyoung even managed to survive a tank cannon. However, HQ tells him to stop shelling because Seyoung must not be murdered. Meanwhile, Seyoung had just dodged another one of the tank shells and proceeded to leap into the tank. He brings his sword down into the tank, destroying it. The battalion commander can only stare at his phone, wondering how the hell he can capture Seyoung alive. Meanwhile, Aegis Security is also amassing their own army. A convoy of cars is escorting a truck full of guns and weapons. Some of them are apprehensive in using such overwhelming force, but their leader points out their president just witnessed his son being decapitated. Everyone would go crazy after seeing that. The merc is still apprehensive since they're going to cause a huge mess, but his leader just smiles at him. He then reveals that all of Aegis mercenaries and security teams all over the world had their contracts canceled and are being ordered back to Korea. It looks like the Aegis president, Sangpil, is going to wage war inside the city. At the military headquarters, everyone is quiet as they listen to their soldiers fail to capture Seyoung. In fact, he soon escaped their perimeter. Another officer reports that they suffered significant casualties from the engagement, and the remaining soldiers are requesting reinforcement. The general orders the battalion commander to return to HQ since he wants to hear their reports directly. A regiment of his soldiers had just fought against a lone civilian in a rogue operation. In the end, they got crushed and a tank division annihilated. He wants to know who ordered them and why. Back in the cemetery, Seyoung is walking away from the smoldering wreckage of his battle. He suddenly stops when he sees a peculiar sight nearby. It was a happy family enjoying the sun. Seyoung's face immediately saddens but slowly morphs into one of resolve. He still has a mission to continue. Meanwhile, Junhyuk is in his own hideout thinking of his future. He wonders if Changsu gave up his name and reveals to Seyoung that Junhyuk was the one who told Changsu to go after Seyoung. If Chang-soo did reveal it, then he is very likely Seyoung's next target. He then notices that his phone is ringing, and when he answers it, it was Yoojin on the other end. Yoojin explains that she called because she is worried about him. After all, he was the one who ordered Chang-soo. Jun-hyuk was surprised that she knew about that, but Yoojin explains that Chang-soo told her. The stress is getting to Jun-hyuk, and he doesn't care anymore. Yoojin can even tell Chang-soo's dad that he is the one at fault. Yoojin tries to calm him down and explains that she might have an idea on how to stop Seyoung. She asks Jun-hyuk to remember the days when they were still bullying Seyoung. Jun-hyuk tries to recall those memories, and a smile slowly appears on his lips. They remembered how Seyoung volunteered to take all the bullying just to save another person. They just have to get to this person again. It was late at night and deep in the woods. Seyoung was resting underneath a tree. His ears quiver upon hearing strange noises. Around him, Black Ops unit wearing night vision goggles slowly surrounds him. They are mercenaries of the Aegis Company, and they quickly report to the Aegis leader that they spotted Seyoung. The Aegis leader smiles and orders all other teams to converge on Seyoung's position. When everyone is ready, the Aegis leader orders them to fire. The peaceful night sky is immediately replaced by a fiery explosion. Afterwards, staccato of gunfire fills the forest as they shoot at Seyoung's location. After emptying their clips, they smile at the carnage they created in Seyoung's demise. Unfortunately, Seyoung is in fact behind them already and is slicing one of them in half. The Aegis leader can only listen as his men get picked off one by one, and his laptop gets filled with videos of their failed operation. A few seconds later, an explosion nearby redirects his eyes. Seyoung had jumped all the way from the forest into the highway where the leader is. Seyoung tackles his car and sends it careening into the highway's edge and down the cliff. Back in the city, the news continues to tell the breaking story of Seyoung's murder spree yesterday. The police also assure citizens they will not rest until Seyoung is behind bars. Meanwhile, experts are interviewed day in and day out to share their opinions about the incident. A youth counselor shares how Seyoung losing his parents at such a young age surely had a psychological effect on him. Another psychologist suggests that Seyoung had become a psychopath, with his mind degrading due to the extreme trauma which nurtured his psychosis. Nevertheless, they all agree that Seyoung should surrender since murder is evil, and he should have just sought a legal remedy against his bullies. Others also call for an expansion in the police force so that they can counteract further possibilities of violence. Meanwhile, Seyoung's story is also going viral on the internet. The beheading video already garnered millions of views, and comments are debating on all sides. Some laugh at how scared the 7 bullies must be, while others idolize Seyoung. The Police Investigations Division are also working overtime collecting everything they can about Seyoung. They have already recovered Seyoung's items from his residence and are currently analyzing them. Another team is also interviewing the renters in his building. As for Seyoung's internet activities, one detective tells the others that there are basically none. Unlike other teenagers who usually scroll through social media and blogs, Seyoung has had no virtual presence at all for the past 3 years. The detectives also heard about Seyoung's visit to the Memorial Garden, but they failed to gather information there. All the people they dispatched to the scene went silent. They tried talking to the team guarding the area, but they were just told off. It turns out that the military themselves are investigating the soldiers and the policemen who fought Seyoung there. The lead investigator slams his hand on their board in frustration. He doesn't understand why the military is trying to muscle in on police business when the criminal is just one person. There's no terrorist organization behind him or anything that affects national security. All of a sudden, every one of the detectives' phones start ringing. They all answer their phones and news comes rushing in. The detectives assigned to guard the kids Seyoung is targeting are being dismissed. The lead detective can only curse in frustration as this news just piles onto his ever-growing pile of problems. In the government's intelligence agency, a subordinate reports to their boss that they finally confirmed Go Hyunjin's address in the USA. Hyunjin is Seyoung's maternal aunt who studied abroad in the US and stayed there after marrying an American. The boss orders his subordinate to contact the Korean embassy in the USA. They want to contact Hyunjin, be kind to her, but at the same time pressure her. In summary, their goal is to get Hyunjin to return to Korea on her own. But if that fails, the government is prepared for any developments. In Los Angeles, Seyoung's aunt Hyunjin is surprised when someone knocks on her door introducing themselves as the Korean embassy. When she opens the door to talk to them, the agent tries to forcefully come in. Thankfully, the door chain manages to stop the agent. Hyunjin fearfully shouts at the agent while the agent tries to explain that it's about Seyoung, who is currently in a lot of trouble. Hyunjin immediately gets concerned when she hears about her nephew and she quickly removes the chain. But when she opens the door, an army of SWAT teams order her to freeze as they point their guns at her. However, an American agent is leading them who calmly greets Hyunjin. Back in Korea, Suho and Suyeon are walking when Suho tells Suyeon that Hyun is currently calling them. When Suyeon answers, Hyun asks them how they are. Hyun explains how he has police protection at his house and asks Suyeon if they are safe as well. Suyeon points out that unlike Hyun, who only has a bureaucrat as a dad, they own Shinjin Group, so they are much better protected. In fact, he boasts to Hyun that if Seyoung shows up to his location, he'll die. Hyun asks him where he actually is, so Suyeon smirks and boasts that he and Sohu are in Nongsan and is staying in the US military base there. Hyun compliments Suyeon's safe house while Suyeon advises him that they're in a phone call for too long already, which might be dangerous. When the call ends, Hyun is already shaking in fear because in reality, Seyoung is currently in front of him. Hyun's security detail is already surrounded all around them, and Seyoung is just using him to get the other's location. Hyun begs for his forgiveness and points out that he was able to get Suyeon's location. Not only that, he also tells him that he bullied Seyoung only because the richer and much more powerful Suyeon pressured him to do so. He recognizes his wrongdoings and begs Seyoung for his life. Seyoung just stares at him and calmly asks him what they did when he was the one begging them when they were bullying him. When Hyun couldn't answer, Seyoung raised his sword and bid him goodbye. Hyun's dying screams echo throughout the building. In the hospital, Yang Mayol, more commonly known as Teacher Yang, is covered from head to toe in bandages. Beside him, an old man is listening to his subordinate list out all of Yang's injuries. He suffered fracturing all along his spine, his ribcage collapsed, his limbs are dislocated, and he is suffering from extensive internal bleeding. Overall, he is in a very critical state. In addition to that, Yang's younger brother had abandoned the training hall without permission. The old man asks about the Society of Patriots, and his subordinate reports they are currently standing down. The old man's phone then rings as the Shinjin Group's chairman, Joyang, on the other line. Joyang apologizes to the old man for Yang's condition, but the old man assures him that Yang chose his own course of action. He then asks Joyang what his next moves against Seyoung would be. Joyang assures the old man that they already mobilized the military, so Seyoung will be neutralized soon. After the call, the old man closes his eyes and recalls an incident in his past that looks eerily similar to today's situation. He also felt the same dread when he faced that enemy from before. The old man opens his eyes and orders his subordinate to summon Yang Jangyol, the master of the Society of Purity. At the Blue House, the police commissioner reports to the president how one of the bullies, Hyun, was found murdered in his home. They are already investigating the scene, but basically, Seyoung had murdered 2 divisions of police officers and a detachment of soldiers protecting Hyun. Sungcheol's mind reels upon hearing this statement, and he asks for Seyoung's current location. Thankfully, the police are still keeping track of him and have officers in pursuit. Sungcheol thinks for a moment and gives the police new orders. They isolate and take into protective custody Hyun's father, Gi-jung. Then they allow Seyoung to go wherever he wants to go. Instead, they should just block all road and traffic that might get into Seyoung's way. In summary, they won't let Seyoung come into contact with anyone but let him go wherever he wants. The police should also block reporters and confiscate any camera that takes pictures of Seyoung. The police commissioner was about to protest against this breach in freedom of speech, but Sungcheol just slams his fist into the table and promises to take full responsibility for any fallout. The presidential inauguration day is in 2 days, so they just have to let no one know until then. They cannot control the internet, but the support of the people is usually obtained through television. It won't affect much if the younger generation on the internet might learn the truth. Back in the streets, Seyoung notices that everyone is running away from him. He doesn't have a license, so he cannot drive either. When he heads to a nearby bus stop, everyone waiting there flees the scene in fear. The sleepy bus driver immediately snaps awake when he sees Seyoung waiting for him at the bus stop. He tries to pass by nonchalantly, but Seyoung just grabs the bus and lifts its tires from the ground. He then tells the terrified driver that he plans to get on. Back in the Blue House, President Sungcheol is talking to the Shinjin Group chairman, Joyang. Surprisingly, Joyang already knows about Hyun's death. Sungcheol wonders how this could be when he just ordered an information blackout. Seyoung also shares to him that he sent his son Soo-hyun into the hotel inside the US military base. Even if Seyoung shows up there, he'll be too busy fighting the US Army to hunt down Soo-hyun. Sung-chil realizes that Seyoung's idea is so sound that he decides to send his daughter Soo-jung there too. Seyoung asks him why he doesn't just keep his daughter beside him, but the president explains the upcoming inauguration day. They cannot change the fact that a murderous monster is after them, but they don't have to draw more attention to themselves. In addition to the US military base, Seyoung also has a helicopter on standby around the clock to get the kids to the airport. From the airport, they can use their private jet to fly overseas. Sung-chil compliments Seyoung's personality of having backup plans. This is why they are the most influential people in the whole country. Meanwhile, in the city, the bus driver has only one passenger today, Seyoung. To add more confusion to his already terrifying day is the fact that the police seem to be blocking off all other traffic on their roads. The driver tries to stare at a police officer to catch his attention and ask for help, but the police officer refuses to look his way. He wants to shout at them to save him, but he can only cry in fear. Seyoung is also mulling over the police's strange behavior. Are they helping him go to his destination, or are they leading him somewhere they have a trap waiting? Seyoung decides to just not think about it anymore since it doesn't matter. His goal is to punish his bullies, and he will just murder anyone who tries to stop him from his goal. Even those who pretended not to know what the bullies did are just as evil, so he should also bring justice to them. Soo-jung had also just arrived at the US Army base. With her is the female agent, Agent Nam, who is still tasked with protecting her. Agent Nam actually tried to protest the president's decision since Soo-jung is already being protected very much, but the president overruled her. Meanwhile, the police are giving an update on Seyoung's location every minute. The leader in charge wonders where Seyoung is actually headed. His subordinates start guessing Seyoung's next move, but the team leader tells them that it's not important. All they have to do is wrap up the scene wherever Seyoung goes and keep information from going out. That's what the president ordered them to do for the next 2 days, or they'll all lose their job. All of a sudden, their radio starts filling with surprised voices and shocked shouts. Police officers start yelling out that they have to stop Seyoung, so the team leader asks them what's currently happening. The radio tells them that Seyoung had just casually entered the US Army base. The team leader questions this since why would the US have just let a known criminal enter? The officers clear up the confusion and state that Seyoung didn't enter normally, he just demolished the wall from the outside and strolled right in. Meanwhile, Seyoung walks inside the US Army base and screams out for Lee Soo-hyun. A few minutes earlier, Seyoung peacefully steps out of the bus and calls out to the driver. The driver flinches and begs for his life, but Seyoung just apologizes to him. He then walks away, leaving the confused driver. Inside the US Army base, Soo-jung is pissed off that Soo-hyun didn't even welcome her when she arrived at the base. A warning then catches their attention as sirens start going off over the whole base. Soo-jung asks Agent Nam what the sirens could mean, but Agent Nam tells her that she has nothing to worry about. They should just rest inside the base. At Seyoung's side of the base, US Army trucks quickly deploy to the scene and soldiers come pouring out. They ordered Seyoung to put down his sword and put his hands up, but Seyoung couldn't understand them. They are all speaking English while Seyoung can only understand Korean. Seyoung tries to calmly explain that he's just looking for some people hiding inside the base. He introduces himself and tries to tell them he's looking for kids named Soo-hyun and Suho. Unfortunately, the language barrier proves too much for both parties, and they just ended up screaming at each other. When the soldiers don't move, Seyoung jumps into the air and punches the ground when he comes crashing back down. In his mind, the US soldiers are just also the same as the other police, hindering him in his justice. His huge impact causes debris and smoke to spread all over the crater. The platoon leader scolds his men for just gaping at Seyoung, but Seyoung's sword suddenly flies away from the debris and lands meters in front of the soldiers. They wait for Seyoung to emerge from the smoke, and when he does, he immediately lands on his sword, causing it to slice through the street and across the soldiers' trucks, causing it to explode. A cannon rotates and tries to fire at Seyoung, but Seyoung was already too close. He easily leaps and slashes the vehicle in two. The soldiers recover from their shock and start shooting at Seyoung. Seyoung blocks with his sword and then approaches to attack. He slams one soldier into a wall and cleaves another one before jumping back. Seyoung then jumps into the air again and lands in another vehicle sword point first, impaling it. The soldiers watch in terror while Seyoung slowly pulls out the sword, now red with blood from the vehicle's occupants. At the CIA headquarters in Langley, USA, the higher-ups in the military are watching Seyoung's live battle with their US soldiers in South Korea. They are amazed to see that Seyoung's capabilities are much more than what they earlier predicted based on the videos on YouTube and Korean social media. Another is wondering how such a thing can even be possible. Their elite soldiers were just completely wiped out by a single Asian enemy, all in just 1 minute. If this is true, then the combat android the US government is developing is already rendered obsolete. A research 20 years in the making had just ended. Another agent inquires about a different research they are conducting. They have been designing a power-assisted combat armor which uses mechanized assistance to the body and provides pharmaceutical injections to enhance performance. Currently, it only enhances their soldiers by 30%, which means it still cannot be compared to Seyoung's performance now. Everyone sits in silence as they think about what move they should next make. A scientist smiles and tells them that he'll be heading to South Korea in the next hour. He also asks the military in the room to order their men to stop attacking Seyoung. After all, they cannot damage such a precious sample. Back in the US Army base in Korea, more and more soldiers are pouring out to stop Seyoung. He realizes that this battle might take too long, that his targets will escape. Thus, he needs to change tactics. He grabs hold of a nearby damaged military truck and rips off its roof. He then hefts it like a makeshift shield and prepares to attack again. He has to break through before Soo-hyun and the others can escape. However, the soldiers suddenly receive their orders to cease fire. Seyoung was surprised and he gets suspicious when he sees the soldiers back away and line up on the side of the road, as if opening up the way and letting him through. Meanwhile, at the Blue House, President Sung-hyul is panicking when he receives the report that Seyoung broke into the army base. The police commissioner reports that since their police force was on standby a little distance away to prevent provoking the Americans, they had no time to react to Seyoung's actions. The commissioner is trying to explain that he's already contacting the base, but the president just hangs up on him. Meanwhile, Agent Nam receives a call from the president asking for their situation. Agent Nam reports that she and Soo-jung are safely inside the base with Soo-hyun and Soo-ho. President Sung-hyul was about to give her new orders when the call suddenly disconnected. Agent Nam checks her phone to see that she has no network connection anymore. She peeks her head out of their safe room and asks a nearby guard for his phone. It also has no signal. Agent Nam wonders if they might be being jammed. That would be possible if there's a tactical exercise the US Army is conducting, but her suspicion meter is alarming like crazy. At Seyoung's location, Seyoung is scrutinizing the soldiers around him. He concludes that they haven't completely withdrawn from combat, but they are also not making hostile movements. If so, it doesn't matter anymore, since if they try to stop him again, he'll just murder them all. Back at the base's hotel, Soo-jung tells the others that she actually spoke to Yoojin before she got there. She tells them that Yoojin already has a plan that might be able to stop Seyoung in his tracks. Soo-hyun couldn't believe it, but Yoojin insisted that the plan would make Seyoung come to them, all meek and defeated. Soo-hyun asks her if the plan involves Seyoung's aunt, since his father already sent a guy. Soo-jung actually also asks Yoojin the very same question, but Yoojin just laughed at her. She then tries to question Jun-yen since he and Yoojin are close, but Jun-yen just cursed at her. They are all starting to get annoyed at each other. Soo-hyun asks Soo-ho to get some water, so Soo-ho leaves the room and heads to their car downstairs. Agent Nam also uses this opportunity to interrupt their conversation and tell Soo-jung that they should get back to her room. Soo-jung tries to protest since she wants to stay near Soo-hyun, but Agent Nam squeezes her shoulder and leans over to whisper her suspicions. Soo-jung finally agrees and they leave the room. However, Soo-jung is confused again when they start walking in the opposite direction from their own rooms. She was about to ask Agent Nam where they're going when they suddenly hear a scream from Soo-hyun's room. Agent Nam grabs Soo-jung and quickly shouts at her to run. Back in the room, Soo-hyun is down on all fours and his eyes widen when he sees what just broke through his window. His guards rush inside, but they stop on their tracks when they see Seyoung holding a bloodied Soo-ho with one hand. Soo-hyun and Seyoung stare at each other for a few seconds. Seyoung then throws Soo-ho beside Soo-hyun, and Soo-hyun could see that his former friend is already dead. He screams and runs away from Seyoung to the safety of his guards. One person tries to help him up, but the agent immediately gets a sword to his face. The other agents move in front of Soo-hyun and shoot their grenade launchers at Seyoung. The shells hit Seyoung and fill the room with shrapnel and fire. Back in the city, Shinjin chairman and Soo-hyun's father, Jo-yang, orders his assistant to drive faster. His men outside the base call him and report that communication inside the base is being blacked out. The U.S. Army isn't also letting them in despite their political connections to Lieutenant Colonel Kessler, the one in charge of the base. In fact, they cannot contact Kessler at all. Back in the base hotel, Seyoung runs away for his life. His guards run the other way in the hopes of stopping Seyoung. Seyoung, however, is unstoppable and knocks out the guards one by one. When Seyoung reaches Soo-jung's room, he quickly enters. However, she isn't there. He cannot believe that she would betray him and leave without him. Seyoung looks behind him and Seyoung is menacingly standing there, and there are no more guards on site. When Seyoung starts walking towards him, Seyoung stumbles back and falls on his butt. When Seyoung finally reaches him, he asks Seyoung if he understands why he has to do this. 3 years ago, Seyoung accidentally bumped into Seyoung. Seyoung glares at him, but Seyoung just smiles and apologizes before walking away. Seyoung's piercing glare follows them and he tells his friend that Seyoung pisses him off. Later that afternoon, they start bullying Seyoung. Seyoung steps on his head and orders him to raise it. When Seyoung didn't, Seyoung kicked him in the face. When Seyoung asks him if he knows who he is, Seyoung lies and replies that he doesn't. The truth is he actually does because they are classmates. Seyoung grabs him by the hair and forcefully lifts him up. He demands to know why Seyoung would just bump into him. Seyoung has no idea what he's talking about, so Seyoung reminds him of the incident back in the hallway. Seyoung couldn't believe that such a little thing would become a big problem, but this just pisses Seyoung off more. He starts slapping Seyoung around. Seyoung realizes that Seyoung doesn't want an apology. He just wants to hurt him. He shields his head from the incoming pain, but someone suddenly yells out to them to stop. It was Seyoung's one and only friend. Back in the present, Seyoung stands up to the monstrous Seyoung and dares him to murder him. However, reverse psychology doesn't work since Seyoung smiles and tells him that he will gladly do so. Seyoung tries to threaten Seyoung that his father will murder Seyoung's aunt if he dies. He sees that this has an effect on Seyoung, so he keeps taunting him. Would Seyoung really want another member of his family to die because of him again? Seyoung grits his teeth in anger and his hand shakes. However, a U.S. soldier from outside the building suddenly interrupts their conversation with a megaphone. The U.S. soldier tells Seyoung that it was true there was an incident with his aunt in the U.S. Seyoung smiles since this would mean his dad succeeded, and he continues threatening Seyoung. But the soldier isn't finished yet. The soldier explained that the U.S. government protects all of its citizens, including Seyoung's aunt, Hyunjin. That is why they have already evacuated her, and she is currently safe under their protection. Seyoung's taunting smile slowly vanishes and turns to despair. His father's plan failed, and it ended up just infuriating Seyoung more. Back in the U.S., the American scientist commends the U.S. soldier for delivering their statement perfectly. He plans to control Seyoung by using his family ties in the U.S. The soldier reports back that another one of the evacuees from the hotel is also a target of Seyoung, the president's daughter Soo-jung. Currently, the U.S. Army is declining their helicopter entry to evacuate them. They ask for further instructions, so the U.S. scientist thinks for a moment. He recognizes that this Soo-jung person can be dangerous in more ways than one, so they shouldn't make them suspicious. He orders the men to let the helicopter in and let it take Soo-jung anywhere she wants. He will be there in the morning, so he orders them to keep Seyoung inside the base until then. After the call, the scientist smiles while thinking of Seyoung. It looks like the USA really wants to get a hold of Seyoung. Outside the base hotel, the soldiers can hear screams of pain coming from inside. Seyoung had just cut off Seyoung's left arm, and he is currently writhing on the ground in pain. Seyoung wipes away the splatter of blood on his cheeks and brings the sword down again. This time, the sword cuts through Seyoung's right leg, cutting it off. Seyoung screams again, but Seyoung just calls out to him and smiles. He asks him why he had to threaten his aunt. He was planning to murder Seyoung quick and easy, but not anymore. Seyoung glares at him through the tears, and his anger can still be felt emanating from him. This makes Seyoung smile since his suspicion was right. Seyoung isn't the kind of person to get scared and apologize. That is also why Seyoung has a different plan for him. This plan would be a very long final goodbye between the two of them. Seyoung's sword then slowly produces sparks which quickly become flames, engulfing the whole blade. And this blade is pointed right at Seyoung's face. On the internet, videos from outside the US Army base are trending. One can see the plumes of smoke coming from it, and comments are going crazy speculating what could be happening inside. Outside of the base, Seyoung's father Joyoung finally arrives and orders the policeman guarding it to move out of his way. When they don't move, Seyoung reminds them who he is and threatens them, but it was already too late. At the base hotel, Soo-hyun's arm reaches out and begs for his dad. His whole body is currently in flames and his skin is starting to burn off. Seyoung stands watching over him and resolutely stares at his suffering. He wants Soo-hyun to know the absolute agony that his parents went through. Back outside the base, the police officer getting yelled at by Seyoung is starting to get depressed. He just got promoted to team leader, but it looks like his career is about to end. Seyoung continues to threaten to ruin his life if he doesn't move out of the way. The police officer apologizes and tries to explain to the distraught father that their orders came all the way from the top. Thus, they have no choice but to block his way. In response, Seyoung punches him in the jaw. The other police officers were about to intervene when their team leader stopped them. He points out to Seyoung that as a chairman of a company, he should understand his situation. He is a normal guy who cannot go against a company chairman unless he literally has no choice. He urges Seyoung to talk with his fellow peers and leaders of Korea instead of punching a low-level subordinate like him. Seyoung finally relents and asks his assistant to get his phone. However, the team leader reminds him again that the signal is currently blocked, so they would have to move further away if they want to call their superiors. Seyoung grits his teeth in frustration. In the Blue House, President Seung is speaking again with the commissioner. The commissioner happily reports that they successfully evacuated Hyun's father, Vice Minister Gi-jung, to a safe location. After the call, Seung cradles his head and thinks about his daughter. His assistant then arrives and informs him that Agent Nam is calling. Seung quickly answers his phone and demands to know how his daughter is. Agent Nam hands the phone to Soo-jung, who then reassures his father that she is still alive and alright, but they barely get away in time. Soo-jung hands the phone back to Agent Nam, and the president starts asking her what their next move is. Agent Nam shares that they plan to get on a helicopter to evacuate them. She also reveals that unfortunately, she had to leave behind Soo-hyun and Suo when she was evacuating Soo-jung. President Seung immediately realizes that this can be a complication with his fellow parents. Agent Nam continues to explain that they only managed to escape because Seyoung was distracted while dealing with Soo-hyun and Suo. She apologizes to the president for using the other two kids as bait. President Seung assures her that she did well, but she shouldn't tell anyone what she just said. If that information gets revealed, Agent Nam would face a lot of trouble. She might not have intended to use the other kids as bait, but if people find out, they may start questioning the morality of their new presidential administration. Agent Nam thanks him for his advice and they end the call. A few seconds later, Seung-cheol's phone rings again, and this time, it was Seyoung calling. A few kilometers away from the base, Seyoung asks his assistant if he's sure that Sunjun is with Soo-hyun. His assistant narrates how he saw Sunjun enter the base with Soo-hyun himself, so they should both be inside the base. This confuses Seyoung more since, why does it look like Soo-jung's father doesn't even care? He isn't even answering his calls. Outside of the base, the police team leader is praying that no new trouble arises and ruins his day. Unfortunately, his wish isn't meant to be. A police car stops by the barricade and the driver runs toward the team leader. The officer reports that 2 decapitated bodies are found at Noryangjin. If this is true, then it looks like Seyoung had already left the US Army base. The police head back to their headquarters to regroup and share information. It turns out that last night, 2 officers were murdered and decapitated. The 2 officers were from a different station, but the location they were found in wasn't in their usual patrol route. In fact, the station thought that the police officers abandoned their post until they were found dead hours later. The police team leader asks who found the body, and his subordinate explains that it was actually from an anonymous call. All they can gather from the evidence is that the victims died around 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. The team leader is infuriated at the U.S. Army personnel. If Seyoung had left the base, they should have told them, since now they have no idea where the serial murderer Seyoung might be. A new officer then barges into their meeting and reports a new development on the case. A man had turned himself in and admits that he knows something about the murder of the 2 officers last night. The sudden timing just confuses the police team leader more. A day earlier, the U.S. Army soldiers are shocked to see the destruction inside their base hotel. Dead guards litter the floor and the walls are painted red with blood splatters. They walk forward, but what they encounter disgusts them even more. It was the burnt-out corpse of a person. One soldier kneels down to inspect the body, but the body suddenly moves. The soldier stumbles back in surprise and screams to the others that the body is still alive. Someone asks if they should call the medic, but their leader rejects the suggestion. They cannot do anything anymore for the soon-to-be dead person. They should just secure the area and start cleaning up. When they finish, the body should be truly dead by then. Meanwhile, on the ground, the burnt-up body of Seyoung starts to cry. Outside the hotel, Seyoung is surrounded by the U.S. Army soldiers. One soldier steps forward and tells him that someone from the USA wants to meet with him. Seyoung looks around him and at all the military personnel surrounding him. He then jumps high into the air and leaves. Before he can go far, the soldier yells out to him that the one who wants to meet with Seyoung is the one responsible for saving his aunt Hyunji. This catches Seyoung's attention and he crashes back down to the ground. They then lead Seyoung to a nearby room where he can rest. They explain that the person wouldn't be arriving until tomorrow, so they hope Seyoung can rest and relax while he waits. They have already prepared food and new clothing for him too. If he's bored, he can even leave the room and walk around the base. After welcoming Seyoung with generous hospitality, the soldiers leave the room. The next day, Seyoung finally meets the person in charge from the USA. The scientist introduces himself as Paul and greets Seyoung through a translator. However, Seyoung tells him to just say why he wants to meet up. From his way of speech, Paul already hypothesizes that despite Seyoung's intimidating appearance, he is still 18. He then tells Seyoung that he is here because of one simple concept, a give and take. America has something they want from Seyoung. Paul starts telling him that despite Seyoung's brash behavior, the American soldiers didn't interfere with his mission. Moreover, they also stopped the Korean government from kidnapping Seyoung's aunt, Hyunjin. Paul tells Seyoung that the US government is willing to protect his whole family if Seyoung would be willing to work with them. That's it for today's recap. Give us a like and subscribe. See you next time.